Hello and welcome, dear aspirants, dear students, to this video lecture series on behalf of CLAT SATHEE. I am Dr. Animesh. This is the 7th lecture of the 3rd module. We are continuing our discussion on offences against human body, and today we are going to discuss a very interesting topic, that is kidnapping and abduction. Both are very interesting. Get some context. Okay. So kidnapping, to begin with, kidnapping simply is of two types. The kidnapping can be of two types. First is what we call kidnapping from India, and second is kidnapping from lawful guardianship. So we'll discuss both. First, the kidnapping from India is a very simple thing. Kidnapping from India simply means when a person is taken beyond the territory of India. We understand Indian territory from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from most northern part of Arunachal Pradesh to the Gujarat, everything. If a person is taken from the territory of Bharat without consent of the person or somebody who has the legal authority, some person with a legal authority, without their consent, if that person is taken from India, that is called kidnapping from India. It's a very, obviously, a problematic thing. You take a person away from their homeland. Every person has this right of staying, of being in their homeland. A person without homeland is what we call a persona non grata. Means a person is an inconsequential person. A person with absolutely no rights and no duty. So it is considered a very heinous crime. It's a very problematic thing if a person is taken away from Bharat. That is why if a person is taken away from Bharat without the consent of that person, and if that person is not capable of giving consent, then some person with legal authority to give consent on that person's behalf, means a guardian or a legal guardian or parents or something like that. Or the government, states also can give permission in some extreme cases when it is needed that some person should be taken from Bharat. Then government also can do that. Now, here we also have to understand that there is something called trafficking. And the trafficking is punishable both in two legislations. Obviously, in Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, trafficking is punished. At the same time, there is a specific legislation called Immoral Trafficking Prevention Act, or it is also called Prevention of Immoral Trafficking Act, PITA Act. And it was enacted in 1956. At that time, it was called Suppression of Immoral Trafficking Act, SETA Act. Now then the nomenclature changed, and now the name of the act is Immoral Trafficking Prevention Act. Now that immoral trafficking act is especially in respect of sexual trafficking. When a particular person is trafficked for the purpose of prostitution. So that act prohibits any kind of, it does not prohibit prostitution as per se. On the face of it does not prohibit prostitution, but it nonetheless prohibits solicitation, or say if a woman is forced into prostitution, or anybody who becomes a middleman, or anybody who runs a brothel or a place of prostitution, all of those things are punishable. And solicitation, yani ki anybody advertising or anybody asking somebody for those services is crime. The solicitation, running of brothel, and pimping, all those things are considered prohibited under Immoral Trafficking Prevention Act of 1956. And also trafficking, although it has a very wide dimension, but obviously if a person is taken from one place to another place, traffic obviously requires some kind of movement. If a person is taken from one place to another by force, by fraud, by abuse of authority, and the purpose is to exploit that person, then we say it is a case of trafficking. So trafficking is both punishable in Indian Penal, in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, as well as in special legislation. And it is considered obviously a very heinous act. Then there is what we have a prohibition of slavery and forced labor. Indian Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, the provisions completely prohibit. See, slavery and forced labor is also prohibited in the Indian Constitution. If you read Article 23, it says that in Bharat, we try to stop all forms of forced labor. Now, obviously, slavery or bonded labor system, you might some what we call bandhua majduri. Bandhua majduri means to understand what is bandhua majduri, this answer is a very simple example that if a person is made to work for another person to whom he has taken a debt or his ancestors have taken a debt. Means when you work, you are obligated to work for someone because you have taken a debt from them. That is what we call bonded labor system. And that you're compelled, you cannot work at some place else, and because you cannot pay the loan, you will have to work at the creditor's house. This is called bonded labor system, and this bonded labor system was also abolished as a form of slavery. It's a very it's an unfortunate practice that prevailed in many parts of India. The people who were landowners or rich people, they used to give loan to the people, to very poor people at very exorbitant interest, and then they made them to enter into a contract that I and my generations will work for you till this debt is repaid. So somebody's grandfather has taken a debt and the son is paying that debt. It was also supported by a principle of Hindu law that was called son's pious obligation. Means a son will have to pay the debts of the father. Pious obligation. It was a moral obligation, but Britishers, very sharp people. In whatsoever they want to exploit people, they will exploit. So all the forms of slavery, forced labor is prohibited in India. It is punishable under slavery, or buying and selling slavery is punishable by life imprisonment. Forced labor, any form of forced labor is also considered punishable. There is 1 year punishment if you do begar. Begar simply means when you are asked to work and there is no payment for that. So work without payment is punishment. There's a very simple principle about it. So if somebody forces somebody to work without money, that is considered as forced labor, and that is also prohibited. Unless and until the government can force you to work. There are specific situations in which the government can compel you to work. There is provision. Generally, Election Commission of India sometimes takes help of the people. And if the Election Commission of India says that you will have to work as an election duty, then you will have to work in election duty. You cannot say, I don't want to work. Similarly, there is the idea of compulsory military service as well. That if the Indian Army calls upon you, come, let's fight, then you will have to come. That obviously that is a very sacred duty that we have. Even if the Constitution would not have allowed it, I believe it's a very sacred duty. It's the duty of everyone to protect Bharat. That being said, let's move on to kidnapping from lawful guardianship. Now, lawful guardianship is obviously in respect of a child. Child means any person below 18 years of age. Enticing a child or a person of unsound mind. See, a person of unsound mind is generally in law is kept in the same category as a child, because obviously that person's consent is no consent. They have a guardian. So obviously we are talking about child. Child means below 18 years of age. Before Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, for the purpose of this provision, the child meant boy below 16 and girl below 18. But now the provision has been made uniform. So it is 18 years. Any person is child if they are below 18 years of age. Now here we have to understand some very important things. First is enticing a child. Kidnapping means enticing child or a person of unsound mind, obviously, out of the keeping of lawful guardian. Any person, who has a child or a ward, if you are a legal guardian. Now, who is a legal guardian is a very separate question. that when you will come to law school, your family law teacher will, I think, probably introduce it in the laws of guardianship. It depends on the religion of the person. In Hindu, we have a Hindu Guardianship and Minority Act. In the Muslim law, there is a principle of hijanat, who gets the guardianship and all. Waliyat and hijanat, there are concepts of. Then we have Guardians and Wards Act. So legislations are there. So lawful guardian is defined under personal laws. But if you are a lawful guardian, then you have the right of custody of a particular child. If you're a lawful guardian, it means that the child is in your custody. And if the child is in your custody, nobody has a right to take that child from you, except state. Obviously, government can do. The state agencies, generally, they also, when the child is threatened, child's well-being is threatened, they intervene. But in general, no private person, no individual has this right of taking a child away from a lawful guardian. So if you are a lawful guardian by the virtue of being parent of that child or relative of that child, and if that child is in your guardianship or custody, nobody has a right to take that child away from you. And obviously, if that is done without consent, that is considered kidnapping. Now, some elements have to be understood very importantly. First, what constitutes enticing a child? Now, obviously, forcing a child, obviously, it's a form of enticement. When a third person, another person, he takes away a child from the custody of a guardian, it means that the person who is taking away the child has to play an important role, is the primary person who is motivating the child, urging the child, enticing the child, alluring the child, compelling the child to accompany that person out of the lawful guardianship. Means I take a child, I say to the child, chalo, I'll give you candy, and that child comes with you. Now, what you have done, you have enticed the child from lawful guardianship. But enticing does not mean that if a child voluntarily comes to you that you have kidnapped. For enticing, you must have done some positive act. कुछ ना कुछ एक पॉजिटिव एक्ट चाहिए accused के part पे to say that you have enticed the child. Although he might have threatened the child, he might have lured the child by saying, chalo, and I'll give you candy, I'll give you sweets, there are video games, PS5, Xbox. That is all forms of enticement. So if you entice a child to go with you out of the lawful guardianship, either you take away that child by force, that is kidnapping, definitely. But even if you are not taking that child by force, but you are luring that child. Children, obviously, Bhagwan ka roop, sache bacche man ke sache and all. So if you are luring a child out of lawful guardianship simply means beyond the control of the lawful guardian. Obviously, if the lawful guardian is standing at a particular place and in front of him, you take the child, chalo, obviously, let's come to the a shop to get some chocolate. That's fine. That's not a problem. When you are taking that child away from the control of the lawful guardian, it is called kidnapping. So, and for that, the term enticing is very important. Now, sometimes a child likes you, so that child follows you, goes to a place where you are. Generally, the children, they appreciate kindness. Since many of you are also child, when you are saying, I presume many of you, since you are aspirant, you might be in class 11th, 12th, and you are preparing for CLAT. You are below 18, and you might be facilitated by some person. So if you voluntarily go to them, that is not considered kidnapping. But if they have promised you something, that you come to my place and I will give you this, or this will be the result, and whatever, sometimes it isn't, sometimes romantically enticing is there. So in all those cases, it is considered as kidnapping. Similarly, if there is no enticing, Like there is a famous, very interesting case, Siddharth Vardarajan. Or see, there is a very famous movie, Bobby, in which Rishi Kapoor ji is there. You can watch that movie if you have time. In Bobby also, the basic idea that there is a girl, 16, 17, at the age of discretion, above 16. She called her boyfriend and said that you meet me at this place. The boy was also 17, 18 only. The boy was at that place waiting. The girl went to him and said, you drive the car. You come, let's go. They went someplace and they got married and all. The question was of kidnapping. The court said, here the conduct of the girl shows that it was she who called her boyfriend and asked him to go somewhere. Here there is no element of enticing. The boy was not enticed by the girl. Now, they were both of 17 years of age. If anything, the girl asked the boy to accompany her. But because the boy was 17, he was not considered child in the definition that was prevalent at that time. So, in that case, the boy was acquitted. There's a case against that boy that you have kidnapped this girl. And the evidences was adduced, and the court came to a conclusion that no, the girl was not enticed by the boy. She only called the boy, asked him to accompany him. This is a very interesting case in which the court said some kind of if it is to be said that I have enticed a child, I must have some kind of control or authority over that child. Means if I am luring that child or I am taking that child away, I must have some position of dominance. The child should look up to me or should fear me. In that case, it will be considered enticing. But if a child follows you, voluntarily comes to your place, now suppose I teach a child or I play with a kid and that kid comes to my house, sir, let's go to play. Fine, no problem. That is not considered as enticing. And obviously, we have discussed the meaning of lawful guardianship. So if the person is taken beyond the control of lawful guardian, without the consent of that guardian, it is considered as kidnapping. Now, there's one more very interesting thing that has to be considered. That is that here the intent to take that child. What was the motive behind the kidnapping, so-called kidnapping, is not relevant. Let me take an example. Let's say you see a child who is being abused by his father. A father comes and beats him every day. So you ask that child कि भाई तुम्हारे पिताजी daily पीटते हैं, your father used to beat you all the time. So you come with me and I'll take you away from your father and I'll protect you and I'll save you. Now the question is, if you take that child for the purpose of safekeeping away from his home, whether you have committed kidnapping, the answer is yes. Might shock you. You might say, very good intent why he's taking the child to save him from his father. How come it constitutes lawful kidnapping? Yes, it constitutes. For what purpose you are taking the child away from the lawful guardianship is immaterial, not relevant. Nobody cares for what purpose you are taking away that child. If you are taking away that child from lawful guardianship, that in itself is an offense. That's a crime in itself. There has to be no rider or it is not needed that you must have some immoral purpose. Suppose you see a child begging on the streets. Unfortunately, we see that all the time in Bharat. Children begging, selling pen or balloon or whatever. And we see this children is begging on the street, signals and all. So let's do something, let's do a noble act. Suppose you are passing by a car, you ask that child to hop in. Come hop in my car. And you take that child to a boarding school and try to become whatever Amitabh Bachchan was to Salman Khan in Bagban. You want to You intend to become a foster father or foster mother of that child. You want to adopt that child, whatever your intent might be. If you take that child away from the lawful custody, lawful guardianship of someone, you have committed kidnapping. Even the children who are on street are not considered out of the lawful guardian. Even if that child is orphan, somebody has the lawful guardianship. If absolutely no one has lawful guardianship, still the government has the lawful guardianship. So if you take that child to the police station and the child welfare of authority officer, there is a police officer who is in charge of juveniles. She gives you the custody temporarily, fine. That's perfectly all right. If any government agency entrusts you the guardianship, that is considered very appropriate. That's perfectly fine, right? Because the state is the lawful guardian of that child. If the state takes away a child from his father, who is, so let's say, abusive, एक abusive father के पास एक child को rescue किया जाता है, and then the agency, the government agency, the child welfare committee of that particular district gives you that child, that is perfectly all right, because once the guardianship was taken from the father, the guardianship goes with state, is government. If the government gives you that child, then you become the lawful guardian. So if you are not the lawful guardian, howsoever pious your intent may be, you cannot take a child from out of the lawful guardianship. Now, you can protect temporarily, you can call police if you see a child being abused. And you should definitely, not that you can, but you should definitely call. The child welfare officer, there is a phone number 1098 probably. You can cross check it. There's a number, child helpline. You can call and save a child. But you do not become savant yourself, or do not just take away that child from that abusive parent or abusive guardian without any lawful authority, because that will constitute kidnapping. And kidnapping, either from India or lawful guardianship, carries a sentence of 7 years. That is considered improper. And then we discuss the meaning of child. Child is someone below 18 years of. Lawful guardian. Lawful guardian, anybody who enjoys guardianship by the virtue of law. Now, which law? Obviously, personal laws are there. If the person is a Hindu, then different law, Muslim, different law. So the lawful guardianship is determined by personal laws. Then we have an exception related to father of illegitimate child. See, in the case of a legitimate child, father is considered the primary guardian. In all the religion, across board, father is considered primary and foremost guardian of a legitimate, a proper and a normal child. But if a child is illegitimate, means that child is born out of the wedlock, means his father is not married to his mother. In that case, the child is considered an illegitimate child. This is a very problematic term, but we somehow try to survive. So the father is of so that illegitimate child, only mother has guardianship of that illegitimate child. Means a legitimate child's guardianship is with father, and after father, mother, both of them are considered guardian to some extent. But in case of illegitimate child, father has no right of guardianship. But if a father of an illegitimate child, considering himself to be a lawful guardian, takes away that child from his mother, when there is, and not for any immoral purpose or illegal purpose, that is not considered kidnapping. Because although that child is illegitimate, but still this person is the father. So to acknowledge his right over that child, acknowledging his connection with that child, if a father of a illegitimate child takes away that child from obviously the lawful custody of mother or someone related to mother, in that case, that is not considered as kidnapping. Ultimately, he is the father. So some consideration is in order. Some kind of sympathy we can show. Okay. So father of an illegitimate child, if he takes away a child from lawful guardianship of his mother, in that case, and not for any immoral purpose, in that case, it will not be considered as kidnapping. Okay. Now let's talk about abduction. What's the meaning of abduction? See, abduction simply taking away a person from any place, any person, no need of minor. You have to contrast between abduction and kidnapping. Now, if a person is taken away for the, if a person is taken away from one place by the use of force, by the use of fraud or deception, in that case, a person is said to be abducted. अगर कोई किसी को पकड़ करके या धोखा दे करके धोखे से कहीं ले जाए, कहीं भी ले जाए, from place A to place B, that is considered abduction. And there is no rider as to whether child or adult, any person. If an adult is taken away, that is considered abduction. Now, abduction is very important to understand. Abduction in itself is not a crime. If I take away someone from some place to another by deception, by fraud, or by force, that is in itself not an offense. The offense part comes with the intent, means for what purpose you are abducting a person. Here the purpose becomes relevant, which was completely irrelevant in kidnapping. किडनैपिंग में आप किस लिए ले जा रहे हो वो मैटर नहीं करता, आप ले जा रहे हो लॉफुल गार्जियनशिप से, ये मैटर करता है. पर abduction में obviously we are talking about an adult, because if it were a child, kidnapping will apply. But abduction of an adult, if an adult is taken away from some place by force or by fear or by fraud, in that case, the purpose why that person is taken becomes material. If that abduction is for a legal purpose or for any purpose which is not a crime, like I'll give you an example. Suppose the person is abducted as a joke. I abduct my friend for taking him to his own birthday party. Whether that will be a crime? Answer is no. Court say, why is fine? Abduction is fine. Abduction I have done because I used force to take away that person from one place to another. But for what purpose? If my purpose is not illegal, in that case, abduction will not be considered a crime. Similarly, I suppose for his own benefit, suppose he is reluctant to have a surgery and he needs a surgery, and I commit some kind of fraud to take him to the hospital, whether that will constitute abduction? The answer is no. I take I take one person from one place to another place for his own benefit, some kind of. Suppose I feel that of this person, this friend of mine is taking some reckless risk. See, have any of you dragged your friend or any person, a relative, from a situation, from an unwarranted situation for their own good? I had a friend growing up, and he had a very unfortunate tendency of picking fights with everyone. Anywhere place he go, he used to pick some fight with someone, and he was a not very strong kind of guy, but he was very, very tenacious, very high tempered. So he used to pick fights with everyone. So we didn't used to let him go alone. He had a nickname. That nickname is he is called Jhamela. Jhamela is a term that is used for chaos. In UP, in Bihar, Jhamela is chaos. So he was nicknamed as chaos. So we used to say, never send this particular person who is synonymous with chaos to some place, because wherever he'll go, he'll pick up a fight. So many a time before he was about to get beaten up, because obviously when you pick the fight, because you have a habit of picking fight, you do not differentiate between the cases when you will win in the fight or you will lose. So we used to pick fights simply, and when we used to think, okay, now he's going to get beaten up badly, we used to drag him from that place, literally physically drag him from that place. Now that is also abduction, but whether it will be considered a crime, the answer is no. We were abducting him, we were taking him from one place to another place for his own good. that he'll not get beaten up. So that is, you'll find friends like that. There will be a one person in your group or your gang who will be what you call Jamila or Kios. He is a incarnation of disruption. Everywhere used to pick a fight. That happens. So, but if the abduction is for any legal purpose, like the word what we can see is for murder or ransom. If you abduct someone for killing, that is a very serious crime. Similarly, ransom, that was a huge problem some few years back. Upharan and Firoti, and I come from Bihar. I confess, I have seen more cases of kidnapping or abduction for ransom than I would have liked to. Unfortunately, I have been privy to a lot of those cases. But I have not been kidnapped, not that wealthy. I was not wealthy growing up, so I was. But I have seen, I have first-hand seen, I know the people who have been abducted, kidnapped for ransom. Firoti and Upharan. That happens. That is a crime. It's a crime. Huge, huge crime. Similarly, abduction for any other legal purpose like causing hurt to a person is also considered a crime. Abduction for the purpose of marriage. This is also very unfortunate practice that used to happen in some parts of India, that a groom is abducted, a boy, a suitable boy, what we call say eligible bachelor. He'll be abducted and he'll be made to marry a particular girl on gunpoint. So that is considered a crime. You cannot abduct someone for the purpose of marriage. And these provisions were all added later. Kidnapping for ransom was added later, 364A in the IPC. Now there's a new provision, obviously, but it was added when this problem became this particular phenomenon actually became a problem. Rising cases of abduction for ransom. And sometimes you do not ask ransom from the relatives. You sometimes try to pressurize the government, like hijacking a plane. When you are asking for money, and see, ransom is not only for money. If you are putting any demands to the government, that also constitutes ransom. Like we have seen Kandahar plane hijack, where the extremist terrorists, they kidnapped a particular plane. They demanded release of certain terrorists. Unfortunate, very nasty business. So when it is for ransom, it's a crime. When it's for marriage, it's a crime. It has been a problem in some parts of UP and Bihar and Jharkhand. This has been a problem. Odisha, Bengal as well. It's very funny. See, it was there to defeat the system of dowry. Whenever a boy used to get a good job, used to ask a lot of dowry. So the boy was kidnapped and he was made to marry at gunpoint. So the dowry cannot be asked. So, gray area, but nonetheless, it's a crime. Then if the abduction is for the purpose of organ or any kind of forced labor, in that case it is considered. If it is trafficking, it's definitely a crime. So abduction with a point, the purpose is also becomes very important. Like kidnapping or abduction for begging. This is a very serious problem. There has been depiction about it in movies and popular media. We have seen there is a very famous Oscar-winning movie called Slumdog Millionaire. You must have heard about that movie, or many of you might have seen it as well. In which there is this storyline: the children were kidnapped for the purpose of begging. They were maimed for the purpose of begging. Their body was disfigured. Uh, they were asked to beg in the sense that they were made to receive alms in public and go to the doorstep, any public place, showing any kind of wound or disability of themselves or of any other person or of an animal or showing a child. All these forms, these begging, kidnapping for the purpose of kidnapping and maiming, it was considered a huge, huge crime. It's a big crime. for which if a child is maimed, the punishment is up to life imprisonment. That's a huge problem. Even adults, many adult persons are also abducted for the purpose of, and they are maimed or mutilated. Sometimes their tongue is cut or some part of the body is amputated, and then they are made to beg for charity, for alms. Okay. So abduction and kidnapping, obviously, kidnapping in itself is a crime, but abduction, for what purpose it is done, is considered very important to understand. And it's a continuing offense. Once you see, kidnapping is a single offense, means if you take that child out of the person's custody or the parent's custody, because it constitutes a crime, kidnapping. But if you have done kidnapping for murder, ransom, that's an additional crime, aggravated offense. But abduction is a continuing offense in the sense that, suppose a person abducted another person and took him from point A to B, then took him from point B to C, from C to D and D to E. Now this person has committed abduction 5 times because it's a continuing offense. First time, if a person is taken from one place to another, that's one crime. Second time is taken from that place to that place, that's the second crime. So it is 5 counts of kidnapping, abduction. It's what we call a continuing offense. So abduction, for what purpose it is done, becomes very material. Purpose in itself is considered relevant. Okay, I hope that much is clear. So kidnapping, trafficking, abduction, basic logic you understood. Trafficking is simply taking away from one person to another, one place to another place for exploitation. Now that exploitation might be in the form of begging, labor, or sexual exploitation. Generally, trafficking has this connotation of that a person is taken either for obviously exploited as a workforce, or is exploited for his organs, or is sexually exploited. Generally, these 3 types of exploitation is considered important. Some people are made to work in the house of someone. We saw multiple cases in which poor person from poor village are taken from one place to another, and that generally happens in inter-country trafficking. You must have heard the cases in which are very poor people from all over the India. They are taken to Gulf countries. On the very day they arrive on the Gulf country, their passport is taken away, and they are made to work like slaves. That is considered as trafficking. That is trafficking. That is the very definition of trafficking. Similarly, girls are taken for being sold in prostitution, or for being used in pornographic movies, or made, or simply forced labor, or sometimes the people are abducted for the purpose, or trafficked for the purpose of organ harvesting. That kidneys and liver of those people will be taken. All these, the purpose becomes very important. So I hope you got some idea about kidnapping and abduction. Next, this is the last lecture in this module, offenses against human body. In the next class, we'll discuss offenses against property, obviously theft and misappropriation. Keep learning. Thank you so much for being patient listeners. I'll see you in the next class.